Hello everyone, you're welcome back to my channel. So in today's video we'll be making a ruffled exaggerated sleeve. Like I always say, sit back, relax, and then have a great time. So let's get started. Okay, so to make a ruffled sleeve we'll be needing our basic sleeve pattern, and I've done a tutorial on this before, so I'll simply drop the link in my description box. Okay, so right on my pattern, right on my basic sleeve, I went ahead to mark where I want my ruffles to begin. So I simply marked that point, and from there I drew a straight line to establish that point. Okay, so after then I simply used my measuring tape to determine the length of my ruffles. Okay, so right away I'm taking my measuring tape to establish the length, and I did a measurement of 10 inches from that point. So I simply marked 10 inches from the bicep region down to the towards the end of my basic sleeve, and then I established a line from that point. Okay, so after then I simply went ahead to place my basic sleeve on a fresh new pattern paper. Then I marked the point where I established the line on the pattern paper. Okay, so I simply detached my basic sleeve from that paper, and then I drew a straight line from that point. So I'm using my pattern curve to establish a straight line from that point. Okay, then from that point I simply went ahead to mark 2 inches seam allowance above and below, because I'll be using a double fold to cover the raw edges. Okay, so I'm using my pattern curve to establish the 2-inch seam allowance on my pattern paper. Okay, so the next thing I did was to also establish the length, the width, took an appropriate measurement of the width on my basic sleeve so that it can determine how much ruffles I want to create. So right on that point I marked 17.5 inches, and then below I took a measurement of what, 10.75 inches. Okay, so I went ahead to multiply that width, that measurement, by 1.5, because that's how much I want my ruffles to be. So you can do more than that. You can multiply that measurement by 2, or you can do by 3, depending on how much ruffles you want to create. But I established mine by 1.5 inches. Okay, so on my pattern paper I went ahead to mark what I got there, and then I drew a straight line down to meet with the 2 lines. Okay, so after then I went ahead to use my scissors to cut out the pattern paper, the rectangular line that I drew on my pattern paper. Okay, so after then I simply placed this pattern on my fabric, and then I went ahead to cut out the required measurements on my pattern paper. So okay guys, as you can see, I actually placed my fabric on fold while cutting out this pattern. Okay, and then I also used my basic sleeve to cut out 2 pieces of sleeve with my fabric. Okay, so the next thing I did was to cover the raw edges of my sleeve on my fabric with a double fold. Okay, so I simply used a double fold to cover the raw edges. Okay, hope you get it. Then on the fabric I also went as well to use a double fold to cover the raw edges above and then below as well. Okay, so the next thing I did was to create this ruffle. So this is exactly what we're trying to achieve, and I will show us how we achieve this, because I went ahead to create one first so that we can have an idea of what I want to do. Okay, so after closing the raw edges, what I simply did was to place this basic sleeve down. I've also covered the raw edges on the other fabric as well. So I simply used this, my rectangular fabric. I simply placed it on my sleeve, and then I gripped both ends on the sleeve. So I actually had to use a pin to hold both ends on the sleeve because I actually want the ruffles to be uniform. You can go ahead to create, run a gathered stitch on that, on the rectangular fabric. You can do a gathered stitch until you get an appropriate length that you want, which is 17.5 for the upper part and then 10.75 for the lower part. Or you could do it this way by placing both ends on the basic sleeve by pinning it down so that the pleats can be uniform. And I also pinned up the center point of the rectangular fabric on my sleeve as well. So after doing that, after pinning it down, I also went ahead to pin up the lower part as well. But I realized that at 10 inches I wouldn't get the puffiness that I want, so I went ahead to establish mine at 8 inches. So as you can see, I'm using my measuring tape to establish that length because from the previous one I did at 10 inches I didn't really get what I wanted, so I went ahead to take it up by 8 inches. Okay, so what I will simply do next is to place this my rectangular fabric, the lower part, on the 8 inches mark that I created. So I'm going to pin it up at both ends of my sleeve just like I did for the upper part. So as you can see, I'm pinning it up and I'm also picking up the center piece, the center point of that rectangular sleeve, and I also pinned it down as well to the sleeve. So what I simply did next was to start creating small pleats, okay, from the beginning down to the end. So I gradually did it so that it will give me exactly what I want. So you have to be very careful when you're doing this and be creative as well. Just while you're pinning it up, you're also watching and checking the puffiness of your sleeve as well. So it's not quite a difficult task. It's just you know something you could be creative with. Okay, so that's exactly what I did. So after creating the ruffles, and I felt it was okay, as you can see, so I went ahead to use a matching thread and a needle to tack those pleats or the ruffles that I created. Okay, so that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm attaching the ruffles that I created on that rectangular fabric to my sleeve. Okay. So okay guys, after tacking and attaching the ruffles to the sleeve, and I'm comfortable with what I got, okay, so as you can see, I went ahead to place the sleeve on fold and then I notched the center point of my basic sleeve. Okay, so I actually notched it very well so at least I wouldn't make any mistakes when attaching the sleeve to the dress. So what I simply did next was to attach this sleeve to my dress. So I placed the notched point on the center of my sleeve. As you can see, I'm making sure that the notched point and my shoulder line matches. Then I went ahead to use a pin to attach this sleeve to the dress. I usually do this so that I achieve good results and then have good neat finishing as well. So I'm actually using my pin to grip my sleeve to my dress. Okay. Okay, I'll simply take this over to my sewing machine and then I'll attach the sleeve to the dress properly. Okay guys, this is the final look of our sleeve. Looking so nice, beautiful and puffy. Well, you can decide to make yours fuller than this if you so wish by multiplying your length times 2 or 3, but this is what we have for our own standard. Okay, so please do not forget to subscribe guys. See you all in my next video. Bye.